uranium left. I know in your book, Nuclear Power is Not the Answer, that assertion was made when in fact there are new deposits, new exploration occurring in places like Kazakhstan and Niger, areas of Saskatchewan, areas of southern Alberta, areas of Nova Scotia, areas of British Columbia. There is lots of uranium left. And as I said earlier, the amount of uranium required to fuel a reactor, right? The reason that nuclear power is such a powerful electricity source is the amount of energy that can come out of those little pellets. And uranium shortages is not a problem. And in fact, as we get into more recycling of uranium, that will just even extend its life much, much longer.
Well, what you're talking about is actually reprocessing spent fuel to get the uranium out that hasn't fissioned, to use it again. But the thing is that they are discovering a bit more new uranium, but it's got to be high grade. It's got to be above 0.01% for it to be economically feasible to enrich it and to mine it. And the lower the concentration in the ore, the more ore you have to dig out, like millions of tons of ore to get enough uranium to power a reactor. And there's a wonderful study here that I've quoted talking about the concentration of uranium ore. And seeing there are 440 reactors already in the world, and they'll keep them going for as long as they can, and they want to build, I don't know, to solve the carbon problem and global warming. I've got statistics here that they have to build one new reactor every week, I think, for the next 20 years to make any impact on global warming at all, and that's above and beyond the 440 that are all getting old and will have to be closed.
The next question, Dr. Collicott. Has there been any generational studies done on families living or working near these plants, and to determine the long-term effects of continual low-dose exposure to radiation above natural background exposure?
So we're talking about genetic effects. Who's the one who asked the question? Do you want to know about genetic effects or cancer? Cancer, was it genetic? Both. Okay, because we reproduce so slowly, and it takes up to 20 generations to see genetic ramifications, we can't do genetic studies on humans except looking at chromosomal abnormalities in white blood cells that indicate radiation damage. I don't know if you know about Port Hope, but it's built on uranium tailings, and I'm talking to a geneticist living there, and he's seen chromosomal aberrations. And a doctor I met recently at Kingston Hospital said, it's funny, you know, I'm seeing a lot of leukemia and lymphoma from Port Hope, and I didn't even go into uranium tailings and the radiation and what it can do. So there are studies, but not a lot around nuclear power plants. The German one so far is the best. They've hardly ever done any studies. Oh, there is one around Pilgrim at the entrance of Cape Cod in Massachusetts to show the incidence of cancer is high in that population. That's an old study.
Thank you. Would you like to say anything, Dr. Graff? No. Okay. Next question. Would you please speak to the cost overruns of Bruce Power and Pickering refurbishments, and what costs are being borne by the taxpayers, federal and provincial?
This comes up a lot on cost overruns, so I want to talk a bit about this. The worst case of these was actually the reactors that Ontario Hydro was building in the late 1970s and early 1980s. Those are the ones that get cited frequently due to the delays and to substantial cost overruns. Most of those cost overruns were due to the very high interest rates of the early 1980s and an Ontario government that kept stopping and starting a project. Subsequent reactors, the ones that were built in South Korea and the reactors that were built in Romania and China, because there haven't been new ones in Canada since that time period, came in on budget and on time. At Point Lepreau, what they're doing is a refurbishment. This is the first refurbishment of a CANDU 6. This is first of its kind. I'm not going to lie to you, there are problems going on right now. And in fact, the book that I'm doing, trying to decipher, you know, what are the technical problems. But on just the issue of the cost, right now there were provisions in the contract to deal with the cost overruns between Atomic Energy Canada Limited and New Brunswick Power. And that New Brunswick Power would own the reactor, ACL was project manager of the refurbishment, and there is a cost sharing that is going on there. Because there has been an over and above, what MD Power is asking is for federal government involvement on that. And we don't have an answer yet on what the state of play is there. Let's think about this. When we think about cost overruns and over budget, can we think of a project, let alone a mega project, that doesn't have some degree of risk involved in cost? And that's why these are done in the contracts. I did my bathroom a year ago. It took twice as long, cost twice as much. Okay. You look in Calgary, we have a South Calgary hospital that was supposed to have been built 2 years ago at $700 million. It's now budgeted at $1.4 billion, and it still has not been built. Right? Cost overruns are part and parcel of all of these major things, especially first of a kind. So if they go with an ACR 1000, we could potentially see a cost overrun. The question is, and I can't speak for Bruce Power or the Alberta government, is the negotiations involved in that. Alberta is a private electricity market. The Alberta government later this fall is going to make a decision on nuclear power in this province, and it's based on the nuclear expert report that John Luxett and the guys and Harvey Andre put out last spring, and the public consultation process that went with it. My expectation is that the government of Alberta is going to say, go ahead. You know, we have an open electricity market. We've got all other energy sources. You know, we're not going to stop you. It will be a private sector decision. In other words, I don't see the Alberta government putting money into that. So the question is better to ask for a guy who works for Bruce Power on how they're going to deal with cost overruns.
Good question. Next question, Dr. Kolikoff. If you ban nuclear, where will the energy come from? And the CO2 reduction must happen now. What is your solution?
Well, I've really already addressed that. Yes, it must happen now. I mean, we're on the tipping point of catastrophe. And I've just said that here's the answer: carbon-free, nuclear-free, download it from IEER.org. Be prepared to put a lot of brain work into it, because it's very, very all-consuming and looks at every form of power source. Electric cars were mentioned, China's making them. If you cover every parking lot in Canada with solar panels, you drive your car in the morning, park your car, plug it in, power it up with solar power, take it home and plug it into your house and power up your house at night. That's all in here too. It's terribly exciting. When I read it, I felt like Archimedes. Remember when he developed his principle and he was sitting in his bath and he developed the Archimedes principle and he got out and ran naked down the street? I was so excited because I actually didn't think that this was possible, and it is. It's written by Arjun Makajani. It came from a symposia I organised on nuclear power, and I had both proponents and opponents. And at the end, this man stood up, David Freeman, who ran TVA, Tennessee Valley Authority, and he said in his broad southern accent, we can supply all the energy America needs without any nuclear and any carbon. And I said, David, you must be kidding. That's crazy. He said, yes, we can. And then so I raised the money and commissioned Arjun to do the study, who trained with David Freeman, and here it is. And it stands to any criticism.
Thank you. Well, final two questions. Dr. Bratt, do you have an estimate of the percentage of electricity requirements in the province of Alberta that could not be met by wind or solar?
Wind and solar right now represent just a fraction